You may have heard someone use the phrase, "I had my life pass in front of my eyes." I had this rare experience when I was 15 years old, right here on this very creek. You can see how shallow the creek is right now. But during spring runoff, snowmelt from the mountains had surged this whole creek till it was 100 feet wide in spots. The trees had toppled into the creek, and it had created a log jam just downstream. And myself and two other young ladies, Melanie and Shelley, were headed straight to it. Stay tuned for this segment to learn what happened next. We're still on the banks of Little Cottonwood Creek for part two of what happened on this day. That we were floating down this creek on inner tubes, tractor tire inner tubes. There's a lot of spring runoff. You can see how shallow the water is right now, but at the time it was bank to bank and in 5 or 6 or even 8 or 9 feet in holes in the river. All of these trees that you see along the river had been being undercut by the flow of the spring runoff, the snow melt in the mountains, the Wasatch to the east of us. And so these trees were coming down and being washed downstream. And we came around a big bend, and I remember as we looked ahead, see a log jam where trees had been either fallen down on both sides of the river or more had been jammed into that area. We knew we needed to get off the river again. We all made eye contact, and Melanie was off to the side out of the main flow of the river and the creek, and she was able to get to shore quickly. She almost exploded with superhuman strength. Shelley and I were in the main part of the flow of the runoff, and we're going quite rapidly towards this log jam. We both got off of our tubes. Shelley, I remember, slipped on some of the river rock right next to me and went down right up to her neck. And having her full body in the flow just made her go faster towards the log jam. I suggested to her right then and there, let's let go of our tubes, which we did. They went down into the log jam and stuck there. We got pulled closer and closer to the log jam until we were eye level with the top of this log jam. And the water was at our high waist, and we were just being forced against the logs. I remember reaching over and trying to grab Shelley by the arm in an effort to try to help her get up on top of the logs, and I would do the same. Before I could do much, all of a sudden she was gone. She had been sucked underneath the logs. What would you do? I knew what I needed to do was to go in after her, but I didn't know what was under there. I didn't know if she was just jammed and stuck in a place where she was never coming out. In those circumstances, I had a unique experience. My life passed in front of my eyes. I can remember a lot of things that I hadn't done as well as I could have done, and those things haunted me a little bit. Not just a little bit, I was concerned about those things. Why? Why was I so concerned about what I hadn't done right when I knew I might die? Why was that the first thing that was coming to mind? Well, the good and bad passed in front of my eyes, and then my mind actually went forward into the future, visualizing what would happen if I didn't go right away and find Shelley. This was what was going to happen next. I remember in my mind's eye a vision of walking down the hill slowly, not wanting to go knock on the door, but I knocked on the door. Her mother came to the door, and there I was standing. She was standing. And I said to her, "Shelley drowned." And I remember her mother breaking down in tears, collapsing on the ground in front of me and crying. I knew I could not come home with that word to her. You understand that that was just a vision of what might happen? And so I immediately pushed underneath the log jam. I remember asking Melanie, who was standing on the shore, how long was I standing up against the log jam? She said 1 second. Well, that 1 second became 20 minutes of me recounting my life experiences. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how your mind's capable of that, but that's what happened. So I go underneath the log jam. The first thing I'm trying to do is figure out, am I going to be stuck up against all these logs? And as I passed through into a dark area of water, it was probably about this deep. It was probably 4 or 5 feet deep. So I'm underneath the water, and it's about just above my head. And I'm looking around. I'm in the main flow, so I swam to the side where I was out of the main current, looking to see if I could find Shelley. She wasn't there. Behind the log jam was a lot of debris on top of the river. for about 60 or 70 feet. I didn't know this at the time, but it was thick. It was matted down on top of the river. Just all kinds of broken branches and leaves and things. And there were pinholes of light coming down under the water, and I could see those. I remember swimming back to the other side and not being able to find Shelley anywhere. And so I got to a point where I'm running out of oxygen, and I stopped and I braced my feet against the river rock on the bottom, and I braced my back up against this debris, this mat of debris. And I started to push, and I finally broke through. I remember turning and looking downstream, and there was Shelley. She'd passed through all of this debris all the way through underneath and was hanging on to a tree branch, trying to get some oxygen, her head just barely above water. I climbed across the debris and reached down and was able to grab hold of Shelley's hand and pull her to shore. We found Melanie. We talked about things briefly. There was nothing left for us to do but to pack it up and go home. So what are the lessons learned in the outdoors from this experience? A simple one would be, don't go into a flooded creek on a tube. Another one might be, don't listen to your 15-year-old neighbor. I want to take you back though to the experience I had where my life passed in front of my eyes, where Shelley had just gone underneath the logjam and down through this passage of debris, and I had to decide what to do. I had to decide if I was going to go under with her. My life passed in front of my eyes. How is your brain so powerful? I don't know. But what I learned from that is, and not only did I see my past, but my mind actually recreated a future that could happen if I didn't do something. Melanie, who was on shore, observing everything that happened, said that it took me 1 second to make that decision. But I stood there for what felt like 20 minutes, watching my life pass in front of my eyes, debating what I should do, not wanting to go underneath there. How is your mind capable of doing such a thing? I'm just going to suggest that our minds are more powerful than we know, and to me that is indicative of something that is greater than what we understand on this world, on this earth. There is something greater, and it has the ability to take our minds, our hearts, our feelings to another level that we don't fully understand.